Hey there, history lovers. Today we're diving into some of the strangest, most absurd, yet 100% true historical facts that will have you questioning everything you learned in school. From armies of emus to a jacket floating in space, history is full of surprises. Let's jump right into it. So, we all know Napoleon as a brilliant military strategist, right? Well, in 1807, fresh off a victory, Napoleon wanted to celebrate with a grand rabbit hunt. Hundreds of rabbits were released, but instead of fleeing, these fluffy creatures turned on Napoleon and his men, charging at them. The rabbits had been raised in captivity, and apparently they thought it was feeding time. Napoleon and his troops were forced to retreat in what has to be the most adorable defeat in history. Despite winning countless battles, he was no match for the Bunny Brigade. Australia is no stranger to bizarre wildlife, but did you know they once declared war on emus? In 1932, thousands of emus were wreaking havoc on farmland in Western Australia. The military was called in to deal with the situation, armed with machine guns. But guess what? The emus won. These tall, flightless birds proved surprisingly hard to hit. The soldiers only managed to kill a fraction of the emu population after several attempts. The emus scattered, regrouped, and outran the soldiers at every turn. Australia's government eventually admitted defeat. It's the only war in history where humans lost to birds. Here's a mind-blowing historical timeline for you. Cleopatra, the famous last queen of ancient Egypt, lived closer in time to the moon landing in 1969 than to the construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza. The pyramids were built about 2,500 years before Cleopatra was born, whereas she lived only about 2,000 years before we put a man on the moon. Just think about that for a second. Cleopatra is more our contemporary than she is of the ancient pharaohs who built the pyramids. History really plays tricks on your perspective. Next time you pick up the Guinness Book of World Records, just remember, it all started with a bar fight. In 1951, Sir Hugh Beaver, the managing director of Guinness Brewery, got into a heated argument at a pub about the fastest game bird in Europe. Was it the golden plover, or something else? Unable to find an answer in any reference books, Beaver had an epiphany. Why not create a book to settle these kinds of disputes? So he commissioned the first edition of the Guinness Book of World Records in 1954, and it became an instant hit. No more bar fights. Well, at least over trivia. When you think of things astronauts take into space, you probably think of scientific equipment or personal mementos. But in 1977, NASA sent President Jimmy Carter's jacket into space. It was part of a scientific experiment to study how textiles deteriorate in space. The jacket orbited the Earth aboard the Skylab space station for 175 days before being returned safely. So next time you pack a suitcase, remember, your jacket could be space-worthy. Caligula, the infamous Roman emperor, was known for his eccentric behaviour, but nothing quite tops this. He made his horse Incitatus a priest. According to the historian Suetonius, Caligula was so fond of his horse that he treated it like royalty, with marble stables, jewelled collars, and even inviting it to dine with him. And yes, he really did appoint Incitatus as a priest, a position normally reserved for humans. There's even speculation that he planned to make his horse a consul, though he didn't live long enough to follow through. Caligula clearly took man's best friend to a whole new level. In the Victorian era, photography was an expensive and relatively new technology. So when a family member passed away, many Victorians wanted to memorialise them by posing for one last family portrait, often with the deceased propped up to look lifelike. This practice, called post-mortem photography, may sound morbid to us, but back then it was a common way for families to remember their loved ones. These photos were treasured keepsakes and often the only photo ever taken of the person. Albert Einstein is famous for his genius in physics, but did you know he was once offered the presidency of Israel? After the death of Israel's first president, Chaim Weizmann, in 1952, the Israeli government offered the position to Einstein. Though deeply honoured, Einstein declined, stating that he lacked the experience necessary for such a political role. He might have been a genius in the lab, but when it came to leading a country, Einstein knew his limits. He remained a humble scientist instead of a head of state. This one sounds like something out of a horror movie. In 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, hundreds of people started dancing uncontrollably in what became known as the Dancing Plague. It began with a woman named Frau Trophia, who danced for several days straight, and soon dozens, then hundreds joined her. No one could stop dancing, and some people even danced to their deaths from exhaustion or heart failure. Historians still aren't sure what caused the outbreak. Theories range from mass hysteria to ergot poisoning, a hallucinogenic fungus that can grow on bread. So which of these bizarre facts is your favourite? Do you have any bizarre facts of your own? If you learned something new today, help discipline that like button. It's been causing chaos at the emu farm, and a simple click might just set things straight. And as always, stay curious.